My name is Jessica, and I'm about to tell you the most devastating story of my life. The man I thought loved me for who I was turned out to be the biggest gold digger I've ever met. And trust me, the ending will shock you more than you think. It all started 2 years ago when I met Ryan at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was there representing my family's foundation. Yes, we're what you'd call well off. My father built a tech empire, and I've been blessed with financial security my whole life. But here's the thing. I've always been careful about who I date because, let's be honest, money attracts the wrong kind of people. Ryan seemed different though, but now that I look back, his approach was masterfully calculated. He didn't rush over to me like other men usually did. Instead, he positioned himself near the silent auction, studying the art pieces with genuine fascination. When I approached him, he was so absorbed in discussing the photographer's technique that he seemed almost surprised when I introduced myself. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said with this shy smile. "I get carried away when I see work like this. I'm Ryan, by the way. I'm a photographer myself, though nowhere near this caliber." The way he downplayed himself, the way he seemed more interested in the art than in me, it was brilliant manipulation disguised as authenticity. When I mentioned what I did for work, his reaction was perfectly calibrated. Not too interested, not dismissive, just a polite nod and a quick change of subject back to photography. "That must be rewarding," he said simply, then immediately asked about my opinion on the lighting in one of the pieces. Looking back, I realize how expertly he avoided seeming money-hungry while simultaneously planting seeds about his struggling artist persona. Our first few dates were magical. We went to small coffee shops, walked through Central Park, and he insisted on paying every single time. But here's what I missed. He always chose places that were just expensive enough to seem thoughtful, but not so expensive that it would strain a real struggling artist's budget. He was threading the needle perfectly. "I may not have much," he'd say with that gorgeous smile, "but I want to treat my girl right." My heart melted every time. But there was something about the way he said it that felt rehearsed. I pushed that feeling down. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my trust issues were making me see problems where there weren't any. You know what they say, trust your gut, because deep down, something felt off, and I ignored it. That little voice in my head that said, "This is too perfect." I silenced it because I wanted to believe in fairy tales. The red flags started subtle. He'd casually mention expensive camera equipment he needed but could never afford. He'd sigh wistfully when we passed luxury stores, making offhand comments about someday. He never asked directly, but he planted these seeds of want that made me feel guilty for having so much when he had so little. My intuition kept nagging at me. Why did he know so much about high-end restaurants if he was supposedly struggling? Why did his vintage clothes look suspiciously new? Why did he always have perfectly timed emergencies that required my help? But every time I questioned it, he'd do something so sweet, so romantic, that I'd convince myself I was being ridiculous. The first major red flag came about 3 months in. Ryan mentioned his apartment was getting fumigated and asked if he could stay at my penthouse for a few days. Of course, I said yes. Those few days turned into 2 weeks, then a month. Every time I brought up him going back to his place, he had another excuse. The landlord was being difficult, There were construction issues, you name it. But here's what really should have alarmed me. He knew exactly how to navigate my building's security, how to work the fancy appliances, how to use the smart home system. For someone who claimed to live in a tiny studio in Queens, he adapted to luxury living suspiciously fast. Then came the expensive taste evolution. Remember how he used to insist on those cute little coffee shops? Suddenly, he was suggesting 5-star restaurants. "Come on, Jess," he'd say. "We should treat ourselves once in a while." And since he was technically my guest, I felt obligated to pay. Do you know that sinking feeling when you realize you've been played? That's exactly what I felt when his requests became more frequent. A new camera lens here, help with his portfolio website there. Each time, he had this way of making it sound like an investment in our future together. But I kept ignoring my instincts. When he'd disappear for hours without explanation, I told myself he was working. When his stories about his childhood didn't quite add up, I convinced myself I was misremembering. When he seemed to know expensive wines better than someone on a tight budget should, I rationalized that he'd learned from previous photography gigs. The manipulation was so subtle, so expertly done, that I gaslit myself into dismissing every single warning sign. But here's where things get really twisted, and trust me, you're not ready for this. 6 months into our relationship, Ryan proposed. Picture this: candlelit dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city, a stunning ring that probably cost more than most people's cars. I was over the moon. Finally, someone who loved me for me, right? Wrong. So incredibly wrong, the wedding planning phase revealed his true colors. Suddenly, Mr. I'm just a simple photographer had opinions about everything, and I mean everything expensive. The venue had to be the Plaza Hotel. The flowers had to be imported from Ecuador. The photographer, ironically, had to be his friend, who charged $15,000 for a wedding shoot. "Baby, this is our special day," he'd say whenever I questioned the costs. "Don't you want it to be perfect?" And like an idiot, I kept writing checks. The breaking point came 2 weeks before our wedding. I was going through some old papers in my home office when I knocked over a stack of documents. As I bent down to pick them up, a printed email slipped out from between my tax returns. The header caught my eye. Phase 2, Jessica M. My heart stopped. Phase 2? What was Phase 2? I sat down on my office floor, still in my silk pajamas, hands trembling as I unfolded the paper. The sender was Ryan. The recipient was someone named Marcus. The date? Just 3 days after we met. The first line hit me like a physical blow. Found the perfect mark. Rich daddy's girl, totally naive. This is going to be easier than I thought. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. I read that line over and over, hoping I was hallucinating, hoping this was some cruel joke. But it wasn't. It was real, and it was about me. "Give me 6 months, and I'll be set for life," the email continued. She's already falling for the struggling artist routine. Had to bite my tongue when she started talking about her trust fund. Jackpot doesn't even begin to cover it. My vision blurred with tears. 2 years of my life, reduced to a business transaction. Every kiss, every "I love you," every intimate moment, all of it had been a lie. I felt physically sick, like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. But I kept reading. because I had to know the truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. The emails detailed everything. How he'd researched my family's net worth online, how he'd practiced his humble photographer story until it sounded natural, how he'd even planned our chance encounter at the charity gala because he'd hacked into the guest list and knew I'd be there. There were technical details that made my blood run cold. He'd researched my daily routines through my social media. He knew my favorite coffee shops, my workout schedule, even my therapy appointments. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment con. This was a military precision operation designed to manipulate every aspect of my life. I sat on that floor for 3 hours, crying until I had no tears left, reading email after email that detailed how systematically he'd invaded and manipulated my world. The most gut-wrenching part? There was an email thread with multiple women. Apparently, I wasn't his first target. There was Sarah from Boston, divorced, inherited money from her ex-husband. There was Maria from Chicago, trust fund baby with daddy issues. He had profiles on each of us, psychological assessments of our vulnerabilities, strategies tailored to our specific weaknesses. But here's the kicker that absolutely destroyed me. And this is where the real plot twist comes in. Remember Marcus, the guy he was emailing? Turns out Marcus was his boyfriend. Yes, you heard that right. Not only was Ryan scamming me for money, but our entire relationship was a lie on every possible level. The emails revealed their plan to take my money and disappear together to start a new life in Thailand. She actually believes I'm straight, one email read. Poor thing thinks she's going to be my wife. If only she knew she's just funding my real relationship. The betrayal cut so deep, I thought I might never recover. It wasn't just about the money. It was about every intimate moment we'd shared being a complete fabrication. Every time he'd held me, kissed me, told me he loved me, he was thinking about another man. I don't know how long I sat there, surrounded by scattered papers and broken dreams, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. But eventually, the shock gave way to something else. Rage. Pure, burning rage. My family didn't build an empire by being pushovers, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. The confrontation happened the night before our wedding. Ryan walked into our apartment, well, my apartment, expecting his blushing bride-to-be. Instead, he found me sitting at the dining table with a laptop, a lawyer, and a private investigator. Sit down, Ryan, I said calmly. Or should I call you by your real name, Robert Henderson? The rest unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated takedown. FBI involvement, multiple arrests, recovered funds, the whole works. But what I want to focus on is what came after, because that's where the real story lies. The healing process was brutal. I spent months in therapy, working through not just the betrayal, but my own role in ignoring the red flags. I had to confront the uncomfortable truth that part of me had known something was wrong, but I'd chosen to believe the lie because it was easier than being alone. But here's what I learned about myself during that dark period. I'm stronger than I ever imagined. The woman who sat crying on her office floor wasn't weak. She was human. And being human means sometimes we get hurt by people we trust. I threw myself into advocacy work, speaking at conferences about romance, scams, and financial fraud. I partnered with law enforcement to develop better detection methods. I started a foundation, yes, another foundation, specifically to help victims of romantic fraud recover both financially and emotionally. The Survivor Sisters, the other women Robert had targeted, became my closest friends. We created a support network that's helped dozens of other victims. We meet monthly, not just to process our trauma, but to celebrate our resilience and growth. I started dating again about 18 months after everything happened. And you know what? I'm better at it now. I trust my instincts instead of dismissing them. I ask hard questions early instead of hoping problems will resolve themselves. I've learned that real love doesn't ask you to ignore your better judgment. Last month, I met someone new. His name is David. He's a pediatric surgeon. And when I told him about my past, his response floored me. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he said. "It shows incredible strength to survive."